good, HHSB crew? It is your boy, the Hype Head, and we are here with another reaction. Man, look, we trying to get into some different stuff, man. I want to touch on a lot of things, man. I want to really start looking at everything and reacting to everything that's going on in the world, man. So y'all know I'm all about entertainment. I'm all about the funny. I'm all about the scary, but I also want to get into the real too. So today we're going to be looking at a dash cam catching an officer lying. Now, I've been saying this for a long time. I need to get a dash cam. I think everyone should have a dash cam, almost like a cell phone. Everyone should have one because when the camera's rolling, people tend to respond and react a little bit differently. We all know when you're being watched and when you're not being watched, how you respond and how you react. So before we get into this video, we are on the road to 100, guys. I think we're at like 89, something like that. I know, man, we're a small channel, but we growing. We growing, and I hope y'all stick with me. Y'all be with me for now until 100,000, 200,000. Let's get it. But make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, drop a like, or leave a comment. Remember, you do not have to do all three, but try to do one. Y'all ready? Let's get into it. Okay, we got a disclaimer.
Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers freedom of movement, reasonable suspicion, and identification laws, and is brought to us by Insanity's Edges
All
channel.
things
Be
I
sure
think
to
we
check
should
out
be
the
aware
description
of.
below and give them the credit that they deserve. On June 4th, 2021, an unidentified individual, who we will call Mr. Bill, was sitting in his vehicle in a residential neighborhood in East Tennessee while playing a GPS-based game.
He looks like
Corporal
that guy
Gallo
off bat.
of the Blount County Sheriff's Department approached Mr. Bill's vehicle and began to question him about what he was doing. Mr. Bill informed Corporal Gallo that he was playing a game and asked him to turn on his body camera to capture the interaction. When Corporal Gallo responded that he had left his body cam at the office, Mr. Bill began to record the incident
Can you
himself.
do that as a police officer? Can you just leave your body camera in?
Okay. You can do that if you want to.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Careful. We've had thefts in the community, okay? And you don't live here.
Do you have a
I do
reasonable
not-
suspicion?
The reasonable suspicion is that the possibility that you could be a thief in this area.
I have explained to you what I'm doing.
Right.
I want to know who I'm dealing with. You could be an axe murderer. Okay?
So could you.
Yeah. No, not in my uniform.
Yes,
I'm
you
at
could.
work. No.
No. There have been plenty of cases where
Not my
officers have
uniform.
broken the law.
Okay.
Let's not pretend.
I'm
Nobody
not-
is perfect.
I'm not breaking the law. I'm asking you for so you can show me your identity, and I can walk away from here and give you your identification right back to you, and we'll be done.
Why?
Are you issuing me a...
Is he breaking the law?
Not right
Civil
this second.
citation?
No, not this second.
Am I being detained? Or am I
You're
free to
not
go?
being changed. You can leave if you want to, yes.
Okay, thank you. But if I'm free to go, I'm free to stay.
Right.
No, you're not free to stay.
Corporal Gallo tells Mr. Bill that he is free to go, implying that he is not being detained, but that he is also not free to stay, essentially ordering Mr. Bill to leave the street. However, police officers cannot constitutionally require individuals to leave a public place in most circumstances. In the 1999
Most
case of Chicago
circumstances.
versus Morales, the U.S.
Will it
Supreme
be
Court held that a Chicago city ordinance prohibiting criminal street gang members from loitering in any public place violated the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment because, among other reasons, quote, it provides absolute discretion to police officers to decide
Right.
what activities constitute loitering.
That's the
In
problem.
reaching this decision, a plurality of the court also recognized that, quote, as the United States recognizes, the freedom to loiter for innocent purposes is part of the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause
Right.
of the 14th
Innocent
Amendment.
purposes.
We have expressly identified this right to remove from one place to another, according to inclination, as an attribute of personal liberty protected by the Constitution. Indeed, it is apparent that an individual's decision to remain in a public place of his choice is as much a part of his liberty as the freedom of movement inside frontiers that is a part of our heritage, or the right to move to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct. However, there are some instances where officers can order citizens to leave or disperse from public property. For example, Section
If they're causing a problem.
39-17-305 of the Tennessee Code states that, quote, A person commits an offense who, in a public place and with intent to cause public annoyance or
Of
alarm,
course.
refuses to obey an official order to disperse
Absolutely
issued to
reasonable and
maintain public
understandable.
safety in dangerous proximity to a fire, hazard, or other emergency. And Section 39-17-307 criminalizes intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly disobeying, quote, a reasonable request or order to move issued by a person known to be a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, or a
That
person with authority to
reasonable
control the use
request
of the
is
premises
gray
to
area,
prevent
though.
obstruction of a highway or passageway, or maintain public safety by dispersing those gathered in dangerous proximity to a fire, riot, or other hazard. However, in this situation, Corporal Gallo seems to order Mr. Bill to leave simply because he does not want him to be there, which a
Facts.
court would almost certainly find was a violation of the 14th Amendment.
Yes, sir.
Because
Is this a public street?
You're suspicious in this area.
Okay,
I
and
don't
you
know
have-
if you're getting ready to
you
go in
have-
this lady's house and steal anything.
you have
or this
approached
lady's
me.
house or anything.
You have
Okay?
approached
You
me.
want to leave?
You have
You got one or
approached
two
me.
options. You can leave.
You have approached me, and I have explained what I am doing. I am playing a game on my phone. So
That's
you think
just
I'm a
your
liar?
excuse.
So I'm a liar then.
Let
You're
me tell you this, okay? You're saying I deal with 90%.
Oh my God, I don't
of the
care what
worst
you
people,
deal with, bro.
90%
You
of
chose
time,
the job.
10% worse people, okay?
yes, yeah, I understand. Your sense of trust is gone
Facts.
completely.
It's not
Thank
there.
you.
But I'm
I
asking
have
you to obey
verify
the
it.
law.
feel
I'm
like
asking
most-
you to obey the law.
I feel like a lot of times the cops throw in what they do as like, you chose to do that. Like, if I gotta raise my kids, can I be like, oh man, I gotta raise kids? And they'll be like, yo, that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's your job. I didn't tell you to choose that job. You didn't tell me to have children or work the job that I choose to work that I hate. Like, come on, bro.
I'm obeying the law.
No, you are not. You do not have a reasonable,
You don't have-
articulable
Yes, I do.
suspicion.
Yes, I do.
What is
You
your
are in-
reasonable, articulable suspicion that
you
I am
are in-
about to
you
commit,
are in-
have committed, or will commit a crime?
You are in an area.
What
that
is
you
your
do not
reasonable,
inhabit.
articulable
So
suspicion that I have
what?
committed, will
You're gonna
commit,
give me
or about to
idea
commit a
now.
crime?
See, look,
No,
that's
sir,
what
I'm not.
happens. You driving down the street, you don't live on. They run your
Now you're
tags, and then
violating
now
the
run your plates, and
traffic.
then now we got a problem
On
because I don't
top
live
of
here.
being in a neighborhood where you don't live. You
Which-
live on Ridge Street, right?
Which traffic law am I in violation of, sir?
You're violation of registration right now.
How so?
Because this is on a white minivan and the tag comes back to a green car.
Well, I can't. That's what we were issued. But if I'm in violation,
Give him my
please issue
citation.
me a
Let me
citation.
see
Thank
your
you.
registration, proof of insurance, and ID.
Can I get in my thing?
Yep, go ahead. All I wanted to do was make sure you were who you
I
said you were.
understand that,
Okay.
but what does my ID have to do with making sure the area is safe?
Okay.
Is the area any more safer now that you've identified me?
Yes, and I'm gonna tell you how.
Okay.
The explanation that I'm fixing to give you is the reason why I do what I do. Okay, this area, now that I have your ID, the area, if something does happen, something could happen, there's a possibility of a already.
So we're saying that if something happens, it could not be a person in the neighborhood that did it. So we're immediately throwing our focus onto a person who probably has nothing to do with this. We all know crimes happen, most of the crimes happen by people you know or people closest to you. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen from outsiders. I'm not saying that. But this is his logic is basically saying, yo, if something happens over here, we're gonna come looking for you. So now, just because I drove down this street, somebody broke into this woman's house, it's possibly my fault. That makes no sense.
known suspect now that was in the area prior to anything happening. So if something happens tonight or the next day or something like that, who's the strange people in the area? That would be you.
Strange
okay?
people in the area.
Corporal Gallo explains to Mr. Bill that he wanted to ID him as a potential suspect in case any criminal activity was to occur in the next couple of days. While it is not illegal to sit in your car while parked in a legal parking spot in a neighborhood where you don't live, it could be considered suspicious under certain circumstances.
It could,
In the
and I can understand
2007
somebody
case of
called
U.S.
the
versus
police on him.
Wilson, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals held that because, quote, there is nothing about being seated in a car which is itself suspicious. The fact that a person is seated in a vehicle vehicle does not create a different test. Instead, it is, quote, simply a relevant consideration under the totality of the circumstances. It in no way changes the overarching constitutional analysis. The fundamental inquiry in determining whether evidence is admissible is whether, in light of the totality of the circumstances surrounding the seizure, it was reasonable for law enforcement personnel to proceed as they did. However, Corporal Gallo's argument that he needed to identify Mr. Bill based on the possibility of a future crime occurring does not seem to comport with the Terry stop framework, which allows officers to detain an individual on a reasonable suspicion that, quote, the individual is involved in criminal activity, or, quote, that criminal activity may be afoot. Casing a home for a later invasion would be considered criminal activity, but there is no objective evidence that this is what Mr. Bill was doing. In the 1979 case of Brown versus Texas, the Supreme Court held that the application of a Texas stop and ID statute when the police officers did not have reasonable suspicion of a crime was unconstitutional, stating that, quote, the Texas statute under which appellant was stopped and required to identify himself is designed to advance a weighty social objective in large metropolitan centers, prevention of crime. But even assuming that purpose is served to some degree by stopping and demanding identification from an individual without any specific basis for believing he is involved in criminal activity, the guarantees of the Fourth Amendment do not allow it. When such a stop is not based on objective criteria, the risk of arbitrary and abusive police practices exceeds tolerable limits.
Of course.
Applying this standard, a court would likely find that Corporal Gallo did not have sufficient evidence to reasonably suspect that Mr. Bill was engaging in criminal activity, particularly after Mr. Bill explained he was just playing a GPS game.
We will come and talk to you. We will commit an
Well, that's
do
fine.
an
Why
investigation.
don't you come and talk to me when you have suspicion of an actual crime?
Sir,
Sitting on the
if
side
I
of the
can-
road is not suspicion of a crime.
Yes,
this
it is.
this is a road. What crime is sitting on
Do
a
you know
public road?
anybody in this subdivision?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Okay. Why aren't you sitting in front of their house?
Because I already sat in front of their house. I explained to you this is a GPS game. You understand GPS, I
I
know.
understand GPS and I understand people doing all these games, but if you want to be hard with me as far as
No.
I'm not trying to be hard. I
You
want
always
you to
say
obey the
that.
law.
I am doing
No,
a
you
lot of
are-
things with this.
you
Everything
as
that I
a
do
I'm
is
just
corporal,
annoyed because I just hear it all the
As a
time. You're being
corporal,
hard
you
with
think
me.
you know
You're
my
not being
job better than I do.
cooperative.
I don't know
Like,
your
I
job
gotta
better
just
than you do, but I do know the statute
let you
for
just own
identify.
me.
I was not committing
You
a
know what? The statute for identifying yourself is anybody over the age of 18 has to have a document in their possession of who they are
Facts.
at all times.
True.
But I don't have to
Understood.
give it to you.
Yeah,
When
right.
you are asked and requested by a officer,
You,
do have to give it.
unless you
If
are
there's a
issuing
crime,
me
he
a
has to
civil
give
or
it
a
to you.
criminal
If
citation,
If you think he's committing a crime, he's got to
then
give it to
this
you.
is
You
not
can't just stop and
serious.
ask me for my ID and I haven't
your
done anything.
identification at any
you
given time.
sure you can ask for it, but I'm not legally required to give it to you.
Corporal Gallo and Mr. Bill argue over when individuals are required to provide identification to a police officer, with Mr. Bill claiming he only needs to show ID if he is being issued a citation or civil warrant, and Corporal Gallo alleging that everyone over the age of 18 must carry identification at all times and present it to a police officer upon demand. Mr. Bill is referring to Section 7-3-505 of the Tennessee Code, which states that, quote, when any police or peace officer of a metropolitan government asks the violator for identification for the purpose of issuing a citation or civil warrant to that person, the failure to produce or give such identification shall be grounds for the violator to be arrested. However, Section 55-50-351 of the
Okay.
Code also states that, quote, every licensee shall have the licensee's license in immediate possession at all times
course.
when operating a motor vehicle, and shall display it upon demand of any officer or agent of the department or any police officer of the state, county, or municipality. It's important to note that officers can always request that an individual provide their identification consensually without violating the Constitution, but can only order an individual to provide ID under certain
So they can
circumstances.
ask.
For example, in the
You can
2000 case of
refuse.
State versus Daniel, the Supreme Court of Tennessee explained that, quote, courts have consistently held that the Fourth Amendment is not implicated and no seizure occurs when police approach an individual in a public place or in a parked car, ask questions, and request a search, so long as police do not convey a message that compliance with their requests is required. Nonetheless, under Tennessee law, operating a motor vehicle is not limited to driving it, as Section 55-50-102-43 of the Tennessee Code defines an operator as any person who, quote, drives or is in actual physical control of a motor vehicle upon a highway. Therefore, the Supreme Court of Tennessee noted in the 1993 case of State versus Pulley, quote, A police officer may approach a car parked in a public place and ask for driver identification and proof of vehicle registration without any reasonable suspicion of illegal activity. While the court would likely find that Mr. Bill needed to present his driver's license to Corporal Gallo upon demand because he was in actual physical control of a motor vehicle, Corporal Gallo's contention that every adult in Tennessee must carry identification documents and present them upon an officer's request is completely
So they're
unfounded.
both
While
wrong in
drivers
a
do need to
sense.
carry a license with them when operating a vehicle,
only needed
there is
to
no
give him his
general law
license
that
or not
citizens must
identification
carry
because he was
identification with them
driving.
at all
He
times.
was walking on the street, you
Additionally,
wouldn't have to.
outside the context of operating a motor vehicle, Tennessee law only allows officers to demand identification when issuing a citation or civil warrant. And officers in any state can only constitutionally order individuals to identify themselves if they have a reasonable suspicion that the individual is involved in criminal activity.
I'm happy you feel that way. Have a good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. You
Please
too.
move on.
If I'm free to go, I'm free to stay.
I'm gonna ask you to leave this
Are you
area,
asking?
please.
Are you asking me or ordering me?
I'm asking you to leave the
Are
area.
you asking me or ordering me?
I'm asking you to leave the
If
area.
you are ordering me, I will leave. If you are asking me, I would stay. I'd like
You
to
want me
stay.
order you? I'm ordering you to leave the area.
Thank you very much. I will certainly leave.
After Corporal Gallo ordered Mr. Bill to leave, Mr. Bill complied and drove away. That same day, he posted his footage of the incident on his YouTube channel, where he indicated that he will be following up with the Office of Professional Standards. It is unclear whether Mr. Bill will be pursuing any legal action regarding the incident. Overall, Corporal Gallo gets an F for displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of reasonable suspicion, blatantly misinterpreting the identification laws of his state, and for
Facts.
forcing Mr. Bill to leave a place that he was within his rights to be. Like many officers, Corporal Gallo built his determination of reasonable suspicion on assertions that do not comport with the court's modern understanding of reasonable suspicion. An unfamiliar presence in a location may be interpreted as somewhat suspicious, and it could very well warrant observation by a member of law enforcement. However, rarely does such conduct amount to the degree of suspicion necessary to detain and identify a citizen. If Corporal Gallo was concerned that Mr. Bill might be a threat to his community, then simply observing him from a distance
Just
would likely have
watch
rendered
him.
enough information
See
to
what he's
conclude that
gonna
Mr.
do.
Bill
Do
was
your
not
job.
involved in criminal activity. Simply
Just watch
existing
him.
in a public place is not indicative of criminal behavior, and neither is it
Solve the
associated with a
problem. Just
location's
watch him.
past or
See what he's
future
gonna
criminal
do.
activity. Corporal Gallo's assertion that Mr. Bill could be linked to past or future crimes that occurred in the area was both factually inaccurate and legally baseless, and he turned what could have been an opportunity to have a positive encounter with a member of the public into a full-scale detention and forced identification.
Facts.
Mr. Bill gets an A+.
Forced.
For challenging the officer's assertions without becoming overly aggressive, maintaining a calm and collected demeanor throughout the interaction, and for peacefully complying with the officer's lawful orders. Mr. Bill was well within his rights to park his vehicle on a public street and play games without being disturbed, and he initially offered a legitimate explanation of his actions to the officer without
Told him what he
compromising
was
his
doing.
rights.
What
It
else?
wasn't until
What
Corporal
else you need to
Gallo
do?
mentioned the registration violation that Mr. Bill was willing to surrender his identification, and at that point, he was legally obligated to. Mr. Bill did a fantastic job balancing his civil liberties with the lawful demands of the officers, and he demonstrated a thorough understanding of the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments. As Mr. Bill explained in his
Man, we gotta
original
learn
offer, he
this,
does not
man. We have to
proclaim to be a
learn more
First Amendment
about
auditor,
our
which makes his
rights.
assertive demeanor and authoritative dialogue that much more impressive. I commend Mr. Bill for staying calm under pressure
Right.
and for setting himself up for a good case later in the courtroom. Be sure to give your support to the Insanity's Edge YouTube channel. You can find a link in
Yo, the best part about this, honestly, was that it was not over the top. It didn't escalate. They were both able to remain calm. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to really understand is that we can solve a lot of these issues just by talking. Now, if the guy in the car had gotten rowdy, then it would have been a different story. Or if the police officer had started getting rowdy and trying to pull him out the car, it would have been a different story. But they both, I will say, both of them were able to maintain level heads and at least converse about the situation. The cop was definitely just trying to flex a little bit of muscle and make him give him his identification and all that. But, yo, man, hey, that was a banger, man. I need to definitely react to more of this audit the audit because we really need to understand our rights. And I want to understand my rights and I want to help you guys understand your rights. But it is your boy, the Hypehead Sneaker Beast. Thank you again to the HHSB crew. We are still on the road to 100. So please, if you have not subscribed to the channel, feel free to subscribe to the channel, drop a like or leave a comment. Remember, you do not have to do all three, but try to do one. Until next time, it's your boy. I'm gone.